Okay, let's talk about this. Are you constantly trying to be, nice, only to feel like you're losing yourself, like your own priorities just vanish in the process? We are diving deep today into what we're calling the paradox of nice. It's that feeling, isn't it, where you desperately want people to like you, to see you as helpful, cooperative. But then the minute you agree to one more thing, you just feel this deep, like, internal dread.
Oh, absolutely, that dread. That's the alarm bell going off.
Right.
We often confuse genuine, resilient kindness with this endless, almost reactive pursuit of people pleasing. So, the mission of this deep dive is really to pull apart that subtle but honestly crucial difference, the difference between maintaining your standards, your integrity, and just bending over backward to get that superficial nod from everyone. We really need to unpack what this cultural pressure to be nice actually means pragmatically.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that and get specific because we want to move beyond the usual self-help stuff, right? We're going to explore the hidden psychological bits behind what we termed the nice Geigel trap. And then we'll detail the cost, the cumulative cost of that behavior, which we're calling the slippery slope of self-betrayal. And finally, the practical part, how to build that defense, your unshakable core of defined standards. Sound good?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
All right. Part one, then, the nice Geigel trap. Let's start right there. Why do we even fall for it? Culturally, we're sort of pushed to believe that always being agreeable, always saying yes, it's a sign of good character. But when you look closer, is this constant agreeableness really a strength? Or is it maybe a hidden weakness we grab onto for, like, immediate comfort?
It's definitely, I'd argue, a weakness masquerading as a virtue. And the core difference,
Yeah.
it comes down to intent and boundaries. Genuine kindness is proactive. It's built on respect for others, sure, but also respect for yourself. And because of that self-respect, genuine kindness has clear, defensible boundaries. You're operating from a place of surplus, you could say.
Right. But the people pleaser, they're operating from scarcity, fear, almost.
Precisely. Being agreeable to a fault, that's the heart of the trap. It means you're sacrificing your own stuff, your time, your energy, maybe even your values, just to keep things smooth on the outside,
Right.
To avoid conflict. It's reactive,
Right.
not proactive. And what's really fascinating is why we fall into it so easily, that huge, immediate gratification.
Ah, the short-term social reward.
Yeah.
That little hit you get. When you say yes, or maybe you bite your tongue to avoid an argument, you get that instant feeling of social acceptance. It's almost primal, isn't it? Like way back, being accepted by the tribe meant survival. So our brain is kind of still wired to go for that immediate acceptance over maybe long-term self-care.
Exactly right. And often this people pleasing is rooted in what some behavioral scientists call the fawn response. It's a coping mechanism where you try to placate or appease others to feel safe. Often comes from past negative experiences with conflict or criticism. It's basically a defensive stance that unfortunately kicks off what we're calling the slippery slope to self-betrayal.
Okay, slippery slope to self-betrayal. That sounds heavy, but it definitely resonates. So what specifically is the internal cost? What happens inside when we're constantly people-pleasing?
Well, the cost is that constant internal compromise. When being nice becomes this mandatory performance you have to put on, the internal conflict just builds. And the resentment that builds up is so predictable and it gets heavy. Think of it like emotional overdraft.
Emotional overdraft. I like that analogy.
Yeah, you're consistently withdrawing your resources, time, energy, emotional bandwidth to meet everybody else's demands, right? And your own account just gets emptier and emptier. That resentment builds because you're constantly putting others first, neglecting your own deep needs. And then you start to unconsciously blame the very people you're trying so hard to please. It's a nasty cycle.
And that perfectly illustrates the boundary erosion you mentioned earlier. When you constantly say yes to everything, you're basically erasing your own limits, one little decision at a time. It's not usually a sudden collapse, is it? It's more like this quiet, subtle wearing away. Then one day you kind of wake up and realize, wow, I haven't had a truly free Saturday morning in 6 months because you agreed to help this person go to that thing.
Exactly. And that loss of personal territory, your own space, leads directly to the biggest psychological cost, the loss of your authentic self. The people pleaser is effectively masking their true feelings, their real opinions, even their capacity, just to keep up that pleasant front. They stop voicing anything slightly controversial or maybe even just honest feedback. They stop saying, actually, I can't take that on right now. Instead, they start defining themselves purely by how they serve others or how they avoid disappointing anyone. And that is self-betrayal at its core.
Okay, so if the cost builds up to chronic resentment and losing who you are, we desperately need a proactive defense. And the sources suggest this defense isn't about becoming aggressive or mean, but about radical clarity. But defining what we're calling standards, your unshakable core,
Yeah.
how do we even begin to build that?
Well, the foundation, the absolute first step, is identifying your non-negotiables. These are the core principles, the values that truly define you, regardless of who's asking you to bend them. Is it integrity? Maybe creative freedom? Maybe it's something really practical, like defending 2 hours of focused work time every single morning. You have to move beyond just vague ideas like, I want to be honest, to defining specific, actionable behaviors that protect your core.
That makes it much more concrete.
Okay.
So once you've maybe listed out those non-negotiables, the real work starts, right?
Yeah.
Applying them. And this is where I think people get stuck. Because applying standards often means potentially causing friction, discomfort. So what does the genuine power of learning to say no actually look like? How do you do it without feeling awful?
It looks calm and brief. You need a simple, clear, critical defense mechanism for protecting your most valuable assets. Your time, your energy, your integrity. When you have a defined standard backing you up, saying no doesn't feel so personal or mean. It feels strategic, almost objective, and you don't need long, elaborate excuses. For instance, instead of that rambling, I'm so sorry, I'm just so busy and exhausted and maybe, which kind of invites negotiation.
Right, leaves the door open.
Exactly. You say something like, thanks so much for asking, but I have a standing commitment during that time, so I won't be able to take that on.
Right.
The standing commitment is your standard. It's pre-decided.
Okay, that shifts the whole narrative. It moves the focus away from your feelings like being tired or overwhelmed and towards a pre-existing commitment or boundary. Much harder to argue with. But let's be real for a second. When you start communicating these standards, especially to someone who's maybe gotten used to you always saying yes, a boss, a colleague, maybe even a family member, your clarity can feel like confrontation to them. How do we make sure we're being assertive, not aggressive? What's the difference in practice?
Yeah, that's crucial. Aggression is really rooted in attacking or blaming the other person, like, you always dump this stuff on me. Assertiveness, which is the goal here, is about stating your needs or limits clearly and respectfully while owning your decision. It often uses I statements like, I really value my evenings to recharge, so I make it a policy not to check email after 6 p.m. See? It's about your policy, your need. The goal is clarity, focused communication, not releasing pent-up emotion or starting a fight. We're communicating expectations, not launching accusations.
And I imagine when you start operating from that place of clarity, that's when you really begin to feel the ripple effect across your whole life. Yeah. Let's look at personal relationships first. Isn't there a risk? Doesn't setting these firm standards sometimes alienate people who were, frankly, benefiting from your flexibility?
Initially, yes, absolutely. It might cause some friction, especially with those who are quite comfortable with your lack of standards. But here's the paradox again. In the longer run, setting healthy boundaries actually cultivates deeper, more sustainable respect. It doesn't create distance. It creates healthy distance and clarity. People who genuinely value you, not just what you do for them, will appreciate your clarity and your integrity. Essentially, you start filtering out relationships based on convenience and start nurturing those based on mutual respect.
It shifts the dynamic, doesn't it? From maybe feeling like a caretaker to being more of an equal partner. And this must be vital in professional settings, too. We touched on burnout, but let's get specific. How does setting clear expectations actually help your career, not hinder it?
Oh, hugely. If you don't define your capacity and the actual scope of your role, you inevitably become the default yes person for every task nobody else wants. And that often leads to doing a lot of low visibility work, constant distraction, maybe even mediocrity because you're spread too thin, always shifting gears. But when you set standards, maybe blocking out focus time for high-impact projects or politely declining meeting requests that don't have clear agendas, you actually signal competence. You're showing that you manage your time and priorities proactively. That's a leadership skill, fundamentally, not just a defensive move.
And here's something really interesting I found in the source material. The magnetic pull of genuine character. The people pleaser often thinks their constant agreeableness makes them liked, maybe even indispensable. But the reality seems to be that people are actually more drawn to authenticity, to genuine character, than they are to that kind of performance-based agreeableness. Why is that?
Because authentic character provides stability and predictability in a good way. When someone has that unshakable core, you know where you stand with them. You know their yes actually means something because you also know their no exists and is respected. Having that core demonstrates strength, consistency. And in both our personal lives and our careers, that kind of quiet strength is magnetic. It's what draws genuine opportunities and authentic relationships toward you.
So this brings us to the final piece, maybe the goal. reclaiming your nice power. This sounds like a really powerful shift in mindset, moving towards what we're calling the art of conscious kindness. So it's the difference between just defaulting to yes automatically, like a reflex, and actively choosing when and how to extend yourself based on your divine values and capacity. It's intentional, not just reactive.
Precisely. And when you start making those intentional choices, saying no sometimes, you absolutely have to build resilience. Resilience against the social friction that will happen occasionally. Upholding your standards, especially at first, often means facing some momentary social disapproval. Not everyone will like that you said no or that you couldn't help this time. You have to develop the ability to tolerate that mild discomfort, maybe that flicker of disappointment in someone else, and bounce back quickly without caving. That resilience is the true armor protecting your core. Because if you cave the first time someone pushes back or looks disappointed, well, you've just taught them that your standards aren't really standards at all. They're negotiable.
So we essentially end up with a new, much more powerful definition of nice.
Hmm.
It's no longer about being compliant or passive or just generally harmless. True nice in this framework is powerful, it's authentic,
Yeah.
and it's genuinely respectful of yourself and of others. It's a definition rooted in that non-negotiable integrity.
Exactly. So if maintaining these standards is really fundamental, not just for professional clarity, but for personal authenticity. Let's leave our listeners with a thought. Consider one specific non-negotiable principle. Maybe it's your integrity in a certain situation. Maybe it's protecting your personal time. Maybe it's conserving your energy for what matters most that you know you've recently compromised. Just bent on a little, perhaps to keep the peace or avoid a difficult chat. What is one immediate, maybe small step you can take, perhaps even today, to start reclaiming that standard? To begin defending your unshakable core, knowing that a little short-term friction often leads to much greater long-term respect and freedom.
That is definitely the question to take with you. And the work really starts now, doesn't it? Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today. Applying these insights, it isn't always easy, we know that, but the freedom, the clarity, the self-respect you gain by building and defending that unshakable core, it's truly immeasurable. We'll see you next time.